Well, the off week is over. Pitt football is back on. The Panthers just 5 days away now, I guess. Today's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. 5 days away from getting back on the field when they go to North Carolina and take on the Tar Heels at noon. Huge game for Pitt, as every one of these final 8 games will be. This one certainly seems to loom fairly large, as Pitt will be putting its undefeated record on the, I guess it's taking the undefeated record on the road, putting the undefeated record on the line to win a place that they've never won before against a team that they've historically had trouble defeating. Of course, Pitt got off the schneid against North Carolina in 2019 and again in 2021, but 2022 didn't go their way, and they didn't have to, or no, they lost also last year too. It's been a tough place to play, though. Pitt has not had a lot of success in Chapel Hill. This year might be the year to do it. North Carolina with a very interesting, very telling game against Duke this past weekend. Just one of a number of things that we have to talk about from this weekend. Pitt didn't play football this weekend, but there was a whole lot that happened with Pitt sports and throughout the ACC, things that are relevant to your Pitt Panthers as they come out of the off week and head into what looks to be a very, very interesting week. So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about all week this week, and it starts today with the Monday edition of the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, you know, some of these seasons that we've seen over the past few years, 2018 comes to mind after a certain point, 2021 for sure after a certain point. You started getting that sense that like every game felt like it was big. Every game felt like it was really there was a lot riding on it. Every game felt like it was this is a big one. And, this is still very early in the 2024 season, only a third of the way through the regular season schedule. They've got a couple big wins under their belt, certainly some question marks to address. But I'm starting to get that feeling. You know what I mean? Starting to get that feeling of like, all right, there's some big games coming up. This game this weekend is a huge game, and it absolutely is. It's very much a winnable game. I think the early betting lines have Pitt as the favorite. I wouldn't be surprised to see that change as we go through the week. North Carolina, and we'll talk about North Carolina's situation, probably today and probably throughout the week, coming off the blowout loss to James Madison and then taking a 20-0 lead against Duke at Duke this past weekend, only to see the Blue Devils come back and score 3 touchdowns unanswered to take a 21-20 victory for Duke, a come from behind or a lose from ahead loss for North Carolina. Duke did it in a very sort of Pitt-esque way, just waited until the final 5 minutes or so of the third quarter to actually start scoring. But there's a lot to talk about there, a lot of questions that have been raised about North Carolina. But from a Pitt perspective, this game feels absolutely huge. And I think it's probably only going to continue over the course of this week as we talk every day on the Morning Pitt or the live Panther-Lair show on Wednesday night. I mean, it's just going to keep growing in stature of what this game means, because it means a whole heck of a lot. If Pitt can get to 5-0, look out. Now you're talking about a ranked team. You're talking about a team that has very clearly positioned itself in the top 3 of the ACC, no worse than top 4. I think they're already there. But, I mean, you further secure your position when you go on the road and win a conference game. And let's not forget, the number of undefeated teams nationally is down to 19. FBS, 19 undefeated teams nationally, only 14 in the Power 4 conferences. There's only 3 in the ACC. With Duke and Miami being the other 2. Louisville lost over the weekend at Notre Dame. Was there somebody else prior to this weekend? Why am I thinking there was one more team? Nope, it was just Louisville, but they lost to Notre Dame. Alabama, Georgia knew that was going to cancel one of the undefeated teams out. There's 5 undefeated teams in the Big Ten, 4 in the SEC, 2 in the Big 12, BYU and Iowa State, and then 3 in the ACC, plus 5 group of 5 programs. Army, Navy, James Madison, Navy, Liberty, and of course UNLV, which incidentally, and I just think this is interesting, UNLV is playing at Syracuse this weekend. I think that's a very, very interesting game and an opportunity for Syracuse to sort of, make a statement that, hey, undefeated group of 5 program, you're not going to keep going past us, not going to keep going past the ACC. James Madison kept its undefeated streak alive by beating an ACC team 2 weeks ago. We'll see if Syracuse can put an end to UNLV's undefeated streak this weekend. But I digress. That's ACC stuff. We'll talk about that kind of throughout the week. Our focus here is on Pitt because that's what we talk about on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know what I always ask you to do. Like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you never miss any of our Pitt video content. These daily morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m., 8:30 to 9:30. Me and Jim Hammett got to get together for an hour of Pitt sports talk. And we include you in the conversation with your comments and questions. That always makes it a lot of fun. And then our post-game shows. My favorite thing to do during the week. It was the thing I missed the most this past weekend was not having a post-game show. Have found other things to do. Stayed very busy on Saturday. But the whole day I was kind of thinking, man, I wish there was a post-game show. I almost debated getting out the whiskey and just doing a live stream at like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock on Saturday night. Just so we could all hang out. You know, I'm sure we were all missing each other. I think we would have gotten a good crowd. We could talk about the games that were going on and what we'd seen through the weekend and just talk about Pitt stuff. But we didn't do it. We took the week off from the live streams. From the post-game show at least. We had the Wednesday night show. But we'll be back with a live post-game show this Saturday after the North Carolina game. That's a noon game, but we're going to be a little bit later. I like these evening post-game shows, even for a noon game. I like kind of doing it a little bit later, around that 8 o'clock hour. I think that's a good time. We can all settle in, talk about what we saw, our observations, recollections from the day, and have a few cold ones and get the night going. So we'll have that. Obviously, you want to look forward to it. That'll be a lot of fun. If you want to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on your notifications so you get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And the last thing I got to tell you about, as always, is our friends at Homefield. HomefieldApparel.com is the place to get the best Pitt gear you can possibly imagine. If you haven't checked out their stuff, you've got to go to HomefieldApparel.com and take a look. The Pitt gear is outstanding. They have some of the best Pitt logos you're going to find. I think it's better than the official stuff. No knock on the official stuff, but what Homefield, and they're officially licensed, so I mean, they are kind of official stuff, but what Homefield comes up with, though, it's so creative, it's so unique, it's instantly recognizable as Pitt. It's like a modern take on retro images. It's a modern take on a retro look is probably the best way I would put it. And they print them on a really high quality material. So you get the coolest looking shirts made with the best possible material you can find. I mean, they're super soft. They're super comfortable. They hold their shape. They're great shirts at HomefieldApparel.com. And if you go there right now, use the promo code PITT24, PITT24, you get 15% off your first order at HomefieldApparel.com. That's a great deal. You're going to get the best Pitt shirts that you own, I promise, and you're going to get them at a discount. PITT24 is the promo code. HomefieldApparel.com is the website. And check out their Pitt stuff and check out their stuff from a lot of schools because they have a lot of really nice stuff at HomefieldApparel.com. All right, it's all about Pitt football as the Panthers get back on the field this Saturday at North Carolina. But, here we are at September 30th, right? It's the end of the month, about to turn into October. This fall is flying by. And Pitt is 4-0. Pitt football is 4-0. But they're not the only Pitt sport playing right now. There's a half dozen or so sports. There's like 5 team sports: Pitt football, women's volleyball, men's and women's soccer, and then the softball team is playing its fall season. It's kind of an off-season sort of thing. It's not really a season, but it is a season. They're playing games and keeping score and all that kind of thing. And those 5 sports: football, women's volleyball, men's and women's soccer, and softball, have played a combined total of 41 games or matches or contests, whatever you want to call them, in the fall season. All right, it dates back to like mid-August, I think, is when the first started. Maybe men's soccer, or maybe the 2 soccer programs started in mid-August. 41 games, matches, contests. And the record of those 5 sports combined, football, women's volleyball, men's and women's soccer, and softball, 35 wins, 4 losses, and 2 draws, 2 ties. The women's soccer team has 2 draws, 2 ties, including yesterday when they went to Stanford. Stanford's number 6 in the country, and Pitt played them to a 1-1 draw. Trying to say the right soccer terms, right? They were on the pitch wearing their kits, and they played to a draw, a 1-1 draw, which is pretty impressive. when you're going to go on the road, you're going to go to the other side of the country, you're going to play 3,000 miles away from home against the number 6 team in the country, and you play into a 1-1 draw, a win would be nice, but a draw is pretty good. And that's where they are. So the women's soccer program right now is 7-3-2. Men's soccer is 8-1. Football, as we said, is 4-0. Softball in its fall season is 4-0. And the women's volleyball program just might be the most dominant sports program in the country right now. Dominant college sports program. Like you can take Alabama, how they beat Georgia. You can take Texas and Ohio State being at the top of the polls and undefeated and all. Like, none of them are as dominant in their sport as women's volleyball, as the Pitt women's volleyball program is. Not one. And that's not an exaggeration. And I think if you went to those teams, if you went to Kalen DeBoer or Steve Sarkisian or Ryan Day or anybody involved with those programs, those top college football programs right now, and showed them the accomplishments of the Pitt women's volleyball program, they would be like, damn, that's good. That's dominance. That's dominating way more than we are. Because like Alabama's undefeated. They just beat the number 2 team in the country. That's great. But they also let that number 2 team in the country all the way back in. They took a lead, let the other team back in, and then had to scramble to win the game at the very end. Pitt women's, which is cool. You got the win. That's great. You're undefeated. You beat a rival. The Pitt women's volleyball team, like, they're not dealing with comebacks right now. They're not dealing with teams battling back right now. They're not having to come from behind on anything. In 12 games this season, they have not lost a set. And I mean, I add a lot of, drama to saying that. You probably are well aware of that. But, like, get your head around that. 36-0. They have not lost a set. They were just at Georgia Tech, who's number 13 in the country, and they swept them. Swept them. Just like they did to Penn State, who is number 3 in the country. Swept them. I wrote this in the 321 column on Friday. There's no, parallel I can really draw to, any other sport, really. I guess if you wanted to draw a parallel to football, it'd be like winning every quarter. Like not getting outscored in a single quarter, I guess. Like baseball, not getting outscored in any single inning. I guess I don't think there's really a parallel you can draw for what this level of dominance looks like. It sort of exists in its own thing, and when you look at it and you're like, wait, you mean they haven't had just one set out of 36 where the other team has gotten to 25 first? Like they haven't, not even just once. It just hasn't happened, and it hasn't. And when you look at what they've done and how they've played, first of all, I think the Georgia Tech game this weekend, they jumped out to like a 19-4 lead or something, like right off the bat. And you just put their foot on their throat, and they've been doing that all season. And it's funny when you look at some of these matches, like the Penn State match, right? They might let them get in early. Maybe Penn State had like an 8-7 lead or a 9-8 lead. And you're like, oh, okay. Now we got the competitive match. Here we go, Pitt. Let's see what you're made of. Well, what they're made of is they rattle off like 6 unanswered points and then keep Penn State at arm's length the whole rest of the way and never let them get close. They toy with teams' emotions, and I don't know if they do it on purpose or not, but they do. And they let teams believe they have a chance, and then they crush them. I mean, just crush them. This is a team with a killer instinct. And like, I hate getting into those kinds of sports cliches because, like, anytime you tell me, like, oh, this team, they have a killer instinct. They will just not quit, or this guy can just take over a game at any time. And I'm always like, okay, cool. So why doesn't he take over every game then? Like you have these basketball players, like, you got to have that guy who could just take over a game. Well, if that guy really existed and he could just take over any game at any time, wouldn't that team win every game every time? So there's nothing like absolute like that. And so I sit here and say, like, this Pitt volleyball team, they're a team of killers. They have that killer instinct. They just shut everyone down. I mean, that's what they've done so far. At some point, I think they will lose a set. And they might even lose a game. Maybe. But right now, they are the best team in the country. And I think it's by a long shot. I don't think it's really all that close because no one else is as dominant as they are right now. And Eli Holstein, who's on the screen there, said it best 2 weeks ago. when he was talking about going to the Penn State volleyball game. He said, yeah, I'm going to go up there. They're the most dominant team on campus. We're trying to be like them. Which, I mean, shout out to Eli Holstein for giving the shout out to Pitt women's volleyball, but he said, we're trying to be like them. And yeah, that's the aspiration, because you want to be the most dominant team in your sport. And right now, Pitt women's volleyball is the most dominant team in their sport. And it's pretty remarkable to see. They're off until Friday. They play at Boston College. BC right now is like 7-7. This should be another one. And a game like this will be a test for the women's volleyball team to show that killer instinct. Like, don't let up. All right, you just went to Georgia Tech, a top 15 team on the road, and you had that killer instinct. You shut them down. All right, now Boston College, it's going to be on the road again. Not as good of a team. Again, 7-7. So can you shut them down again? Can you bring that same kind of energy and killer instinct that you had against Penn State, that you had against Georgia Tech when you go to take on Boston College? So the larger point, though, 35-4-2. Pitt sports are winning a lot right now, and it's pretty fun to watch. There'll be more opportunities coming up here for these teams to keep winning. Men's soccer takes on Howard on Wednesday. They actually beat number 17 Virginia Tech 2-0 over the weekend. What do we have? Women's soccer takes on Clemson on Thursday. And then, of course, football. Like I mentioned, volleyball is at Boston College on Friday. And then football at North Carolina on Saturday. And we can look more and more into that North Carolina-Duke game. What do we take away from that? What's relevant for Pitt? I think the biggest thing is, if you watch that game, it was 17-0 at halftime. North Carolina was winning. They only gave up 97 yards to Duke in the first half. And this is coming off the game where James Madison scored 70 on them. And they got a decent amount of points out of like punt return, touchdowns, and fumble returns, and scoop and scores and things like that. But they also just went up and down the field on North Carolina. I mean, they were pretty dominant, crushing North Carolina's defense. So for Carolina to come out and keep Duke in check in the first half and only give up 97 yards and shut them out, you say, okay, maybe they figured it out. Maybe Duke is questionable, but maybe North Carolina is not as bad as we thought. Well, they gave up almost 300 yards in the second half. And it turns out they actually were as bad as we thought. Now, you can say, well, which half are you going to believe? I'm going to be inclined to believe the half when they really needed a stop. They couldn't get it. They gave up 3 touchdowns in the final 20 minutes of the game. Ended up blowing a 20-0 lead to lose 21-20. And it's interesting when you look at some of the fallout from that game. Of course, after the James Madison game, Mac Brown basically told the players, hey, if you're not going to play for me, or if you don't think I can coach you well enough, then I'll go find something else to do. And it turned into a story about Mac Brown resigning, which he didn't do. But his tone was very different coming out of the Duke loss. It was, we tried really hard, which wasn't the case a week ago. We worked really hard, and we just came up short. And that's just how college football games go sometimes. It's a different kind of tone, and I think it felt a little bit panicked to me. Like, it's one thing when you get blown out. Because you get blown out like they did against James Madison, you can almost throw proverbially throw the tape away. I mean, obviously they're still going to study it and all that, but you can sort of be like, okay, that was so ridiculous and so bad that just get rid of it. Just don't even think about it anymore. We got to pretend like that didn't happen because of how crazy that was, how beyond the pale that was, how outside the norm it was. This game this past weekend, though, now you're starting to question yourself, I think. Because now, even if you did try to throw out the tape from the James Madison loss, now you've got that blowout loss to a G5 level program, and you've got this lose from ahead defeat against a rival team where you had them beat, you were up 3 scores, and then you give up 3 touchdowns in a row to blow that game. And now I think you start entering a crisis of confidence for the coaches and the players of like, what can you do? You tried to rally the troops last week. You didn't make any players available to the media after the James Madison game or through the week leading up to the Duke game. That didn't work because you ended up blowing this game and your defense looked as bad as it did against James Madison in the second half there against Duke. And so this is a North Carolina team that I think is facing something of a crisis of confidence. If you can stop Amari and Hampton, you might be able to keep North Carolina's offense largely in check. Can their quarterback, who was the backup to start the season, lead the team? Is he good enough to lead them to victory? He wasn't on Saturday against Duke. He looked okay in the first half and did nothing in the second half. And I mean, we have questions about Duke too, but Pitt doesn't have to play Duke. So that's less of a concern, less of interest. Pitt does get to play North Carolina this weekend in Chapel Hill. Like I said at the beginning, it's a place that's been very difficult for Pitt to play. It's a place that they've never won. And there are probably a lot of reasons for that. And there have been some mind-numbingly stupid ways for games to go that we've seen down there. 2014, 2016, 2018 were all disasters in their own way. 2022 was just, Kalaji Kansi got ejected for targeting, and, the offense was still kind of a mess, and that's neither here nor there. But those first three, the 14, 16, and 18 games, they all went really bad for Pitt on a lot of different levels. Now here's an opportunity to maybe get one right. Here's an opportunity to get one back. They can't overlook this team. Obviously, Pitt's not good enough to overlook this team. They've got to, go out with whatever focus and intensity they had against West Virginia and had against Cincinnati. But the opportunity's there. The opportunity is there to beat this team. Pitt can beat this team, and maybe Pitt even should beat this team. If you think Pitt is in a certain spot in the ACC, if you think Pitt is a top 4 team in the conference, like I do, if you think Pitt might even be a top 3 team in the conference, then they should win this game. Simply put. Because I don't think North Carolina is a top 5 team in this conference. So if you're a top 5 team facing a top 5 team and you're on the road, then yeah, you maybe wouldn't say you're supposed to win this game or you should win this game. But when you're top 5 team, top 4 team, top 3 team facing a bottom half team on the road, you should win. You should win this game. It's going to be really interesting. And we got a whole week to build up to it, too. So we're going to be doing that here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for watching today. Blah. I'm so excited to be back at it that I can't even get my words straight. But like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and that way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. Make sure you check out the website as well, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all the Pitt sports news you can possibly handle. That'll do it for us today. Pat Narduzzi press conference later today. We'll have that video online here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and then Morning Pitt videos all through the week, Monday through Friday, to get you ready for Pitt at Carolina. A huge one in Chapel Hill. I can't wait. We're counting down the days. We'll talk to you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.